The Norfolk Broads, a labyrinth of shallow lakes and winding rivers, lay cloaked in a pre-dawn mist that clung to the water like a shroud. The air was thick with the earthy scent of damp reeds and the distant, mournful cries of unseen waterfowl. For old Silas Blackwood, a retired boat builder with hands as gnarled as ancient willow roots, this was his sanctuary. His small, weathered houseboat, the Kingfisher's Rest, was moored in a secluded backwater, far from the chugging engines of tourist boats and the chatter of holiday-makers. Silas was a man of routine, his days dictated by the subtle shifts in the Broads' moods. He would rise with the first hint of light, brew a pot of strong tea, and sit on his small deck, watching the awakening of the marsh. He knew every rustle in the reeds, every splash in the water, every bird call that echoed across the stillness. He was a part of this landscape, as much as the ancient oaks that lined the waterways or the elusive otters that slipped beneath the murky surface. One particularly misty morning, as the sun began its slow ascent, painting the fog with streaks of pale gold, Silas heard a different kind of sound. It wasn't the familiar honk of a greylag goose or the sharp call of a lapwing. This was a soft, almost whimpering sound, laced with a note of distress. It seemed to be coming from the dense reed bed that fringed a small, uninhabited island a short distance from his mooring. Curiosity, a persistent companion in Silas' solitary life, tugged at him. He finished his tea, donned his worn tweed jacket, and untied his small punt, a flat-bottomed boat perfect for navigating the shallow waters. The mist swirled around him as he pulled his way towards the island, the silence amplifying the rhythmic push of his pole against the muddy bottom. As he drew closer, the whimpering grew more distinct. It sounded like a small creature in pain. Silas' heart, weathered by time but still capable of empathy, quickened its pace. He carefully pushed aside the tall reeds, their feathery tops heavy with moisture, and peered into the tangled undergrowth. What he saw made him stop, his breath catching in his throat. Nestled amongst the fallen leaves and broken branches was a bird, larger than any he usually encountered on the Broads. It was a heron, but one he didn't immediately recognize. Its plumage was a striking mix of slate gray and a startling, almost luminous white. One of its long, elegant wings lay at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. The bird's dark, intelligent eyes, wide with fear and pain, fixed on Silas as he parted the reeds. Silas had seen injured birds before, the harsh realities of nature often playing out in the wild. But there was something about this creature, its unusual coloration and the intensity of its gaze, that held him captive. It wasn't just another injured animal, it felt different. He cautiously approached, speaking in low, soothing tones, the kind he used to calm frightened animals as a boy. The heron flinched, a low hiss escaping its beak, but it didn't try to flee, its injured wing preventing any escape. Silas could see the frantic pulse in its long neck, the shallow rise and fall of its chest. It was in a bad way. He knew he couldn't leave it to fend for itself. Predators, both on the ground and in the air, would quickly take advantage of its vulnerability. The Broads, for all their beauty, could be a harsh and unforgiving place. Carefully, Silas reached out, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he approached the injured wing. The heron tensed, but seemed to sense the lack of threat in his touch. He could feel the sharp break beneath the soft feathers, a clean snap that would cause immense pain. Getting the large bird back to his houseboat would be a challenge. It was strong, even injured, and its long, sharp beak could deliver a nasty bite if it felt threatened. But Silas knew he had to try. He couldn't bear the thought of leaving this magnificent creature to suffer and die alone in the cold, damp undergrowth. He spent the next hour in a slow, painstaking process of gaining the heron's trust. He spoke to it softly, offering it sips of water from his flask, which it eventually accepted with hesitant movements. Slowly, carefully, he managed to coax it into a large fishing net he kept on his punt. The heron struggled at first, its powerful legs kicking, but Silas' calm persistence eventually prevailed. With the injured bird secured, he began the slow journey back to the Kingfisher's Rest. his mind already racing with the practicalities of caring for such a large and wild creature. He knew little about herons, their diet, or their needs. But he was determined to help this striking bird with the intense gaze that seemed to hold a silent plea. As he pulled his punt through the receding mist, the sun finally breaking through in earnest, Silas couldn't shake the feeling that this chance encounter was more than just a simple act of rescue. There was an air of mystery surrounding this unusual heron, a sense that its arrival in his quiet corner of the Broads was the beginning of something unexpected. Something that would stir the still waters of his solitary life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The whispers in the reeds seemed to carry a hint of something more, a secret held within the heart of the marsh, now entwined with the fate of a fragile trust. Back on the Kingfisher's Rest, Silas carefully transferred the injured heron from the net to a makeshift bed he had prepared in a quiet corner of his small living space. He'd lined a large wicker basket with soft blankets, hoping to provide some comfort. The heron, despite its initial fear, remained surprisingly still, its dark eyes following Silas' every move. The houseboat, usually filled with the comforting clutter of Silas' life, tools, half-finished carvings, stacks of well-worn books, now felt different, charged with the presence of this wild creature. The air carried a new scent, a musky, slightly fishy aroma that spoke of the marshes and the wildness Silas had always cherished. His first priority was the broken wing. Gently, Silas examined it again. The break was clean, but it would need to be immobilized to heal properly. He rummaged through his meager first aid supplies, finding some strips of clean linen and a few sturdy twigs. Years of mending broken fishing gear and crafting intricate boat parts had given him a steady hand and a practical understanding of makeshift repairs. Working with painstaking care, Silas splinted the heron's wing, his touch as light as a butterfly's. The bird remained remarkably calm, only occasionally letting out a soft hiss when he inadvertently touched a particularly sensitive spot. Its trust, fragile as it was, seemed to be growing with each gentle touch. Once the wing was secured, Silas turned his attention to nourishment. He knew herons were primarily fish eaters. He had a small supply of fresh roach he had caught the previous day, intended for his own supper. Now, these would serve a more urgent purpose. He offered a small piece of fish to the heron, holding it out on the palm of his hand. The bird eyed it warily for a long moment, its head cocked as if assessing the situation. Then, with a sudden, swift movement, it snatched the fish from his hand, swallowing it whole. A small victory for Silas, a sign that the wild creature was beginning to accept his care. Days turned into nights, marked by the slow rhythm of life on the Broads and the gradual adjustment of the heron to its temporary confinement. Silas named her Ariel, a name that seemed to suit her ethereal beauty and the way she sometimes looked out at the water with a longing in her eyes. Ariel proved to be a demanding patient. She had a voracious appetite, and Silas found himself spending more and more time fishing to keep her fed. He learned her subtle cues, the slight ruffle of her feathers when she was hungry, the soft croaking sound she made when she wanted water. He spoke to her constantly, his voice a low murmur in the quiet houseboat, sharing stories of the Broads, of the changing seasons, of his long life lived in harmony with nature. Slowly, tentatively, a bond began to form between the old man and the wild bird. Ariel would watch him intently as he moved around the houseboat, sometimes even hopping closer on her good leg. She would take fish from his hand with increasing gentleness, her sharp beak never once threatening his fingers. But beneath this growing trust, a sense of unease began to settle in Silas' mind. Ariel's unusual white plumage was something he couldn't quite reconcile with the gray herons he knew so well. He had seen the occasional leucistic bird, lacking pigment in parts of their feathers, but Ariel was almost entirely white, with only subtle hints of gray on her back and wing tips. It was as if she belonged to another world, a creature of myth and legend that had somehow found its way to the muddy waters of the Norfolk Broads. He started to observe her more closely, noticing other subtle differences. Her eyes seemed larger, more expressive than those of a common heron. Her movements, even when hobbling on an injured wing, possessed a certain grace, an almost otherworldly elegance. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Silas was sitting on his deck, Ariel resting quietly beside him. A local naturalist, a young woman named Eleanor who occasionally visited Silas for his knowledge of the Broads, pulled her narrow boat alongside. "Silas, how are you?" she called out, her voice cheerful. "Anything interesting to report?" Silas hesitated. He wasn't sure how Eleanor would react to his unusual guest. He knew her to be a staunch advocate for wildlife, and he worried she might insist on taking Ariel away to a sanctuary, a place that felt too far removed from the quiet intimacy they had begun to share. "Just the usual," Silas replied, a touch of evasiveness in his voice. "The bitterns are booming, and I saw a kingfisher flash by earlier." Eleanor, however, was perceptive. She noticed the large wicker basket on the deck, the faint fishy smell in the air, and the way Silas kept glancing towards the open doorway of his houseboat. "Something else is going on, Silas," she said, her eyes narrowing with friendly curiosity. "I can feel it." Silas sighed, knowing he couldn't keep his secret for long. He gestured towards the doorway. "I have a guest. An injured heron." Eleanor's eyebrows rose in surprise. "A heron? Which kind?" "That's the thing," Silas said, his voice low. "I've never seen one quite like her." He carefully beckoned Eleanor inside. As she stepped into the dimly lit houseboat, her eyes widened in astonishment as she saw Ariel, perched regally on her makeshift bed, her white plumage gleaming softly in the lamplight. "Good heavens," Eleanor breathed, her voice hushed with awe. "She's magnificent. I've never seen a white heron like this on the Broads." "Are you sure she's not an escapee from somewhere?" Silas shook his head. "She was injured, caught in the reeds. She's been here for days." Eleanor approached Ariel slowly, her movements gentle and respectful. She examined the splint on her wing, her expression thoughtful. "You've done a good job, Silas. But this is unusual. We need to identify her. She might be a rare migrant, or something else entirely." A flicker of unease ran through Silas. He didn't want Ariel to be just a specimen, a thing to be studied and categorized. She was more than that to him now. She was a companion, a silent presence that had filled the quiet corners of his life. The thought of her being taken away, her fragile trust broken, filled him with a sudden, unexpected pang of loneliness. The whispers in the reeds, he realized, might be carrying more than just the secrets of the marsh. They might be hinting at a few. Unraveling the mystery. Eleanor spent a long time examining Ariel, her expert eyes noting every detail of the bird's plumage, the length of her legs and beak, the subtle nuances of her calls. She took several photographs, promising Silas she would consult with ornithologists and check her extensive field guides. "She's definitely a heron," Eleanor confirmed, her brow furrowed in thought. "But the all-white plumage is highly unusual for a gray heron, Ardea cinerea, which is what we typically see here. Leucism can cause white patches, but this is almost complete. And her build, she seems a little more slender, her neck a touch longer." Days passed in a state of quiet anticipation. Silas continued his routine, caring for Ariel, fishing for her meals, and sharing the quiet companionship that had blossomed between them. Eleanor visited regularly, bringing with her more fish and updates on her research. "I've sent the photos to a few experts," she told Silas one afternoon, her voice tinged with excitement. "One of them thinks she might be a great egret, Ardea alba. They're more common in warmer climates, though vagrant sightings do occur in the UK. A great egret." The name sounded exotic, almost magical, fitting for Ariel's ethereal beauty. Silas looked at the bird, who was now able to hop around the houseboat with more ease, her broken wing healing steadily. Could she have traveled so far, only to end up injured in his quiet backwater? However, there were still inconsistencies. The experts Eleanor consulted noted that great egrets typically had yellow bills and black legs, while Ariel's bill was a pale yellow-orange, and her legs were a dark gray. The mystery deepened. One particularly still evening, As the sun cast long shadows across the Broads, Eleanor arrived with a box of old books she had borrowed from the local wildlife trust. "I found something," she said, her voice hushed with intrigue. An old account, dating back almost a century, from a naturalist who explored this very area. She carefully opened a brittle, leather-bound volume, its pages filled with faded ink and delicate sketches. She pointed to a drawing of a bird that made Silas' breath catch in his throat. It was unmistakably Ariel. "He called it the specter of the Broads," Eleanor read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "A large heron, almost pure white, with a pale bill and dark legs. Local folklore spoke of it as a harbinger of change, a creature touched by the mists themselves. Sightings were rare, almost mythical." Silas stared at the drawing, then at Ariel, who was preening her feathers nearby, seemingly oblivious to the stir she was causing. A creature of folklore? A harbinger? It sounded fantastical, yet looking at Ariel, it didn't seem entirely impossible. There was an undeniable aura of otherworldliness about her. The old naturalist's notes went on to describe the bird's behavior, its unusual intelligence, and its apparent ability to understand human gestures. He recounted tales from local fishermen who claimed the white heron had guided them through dense fog or warned them of approaching storms with its distinctive calls. Silas remembered the way Ariel would watch him, her intelligent eyes seeming to understand his words. He recalled the feeling he had when he first found her, the sense that this was more than just a random encounter. Could there be some truth to these old legends? As Ariel's wing continued to heal, Silas faced a growing dilemma. He knew he couldn't keep her forever. She was a wild creature, meant to soar through the skies and hunt in the open waters. But the thought of releasing her, of losing her quiet companionship, filled him with a profound sadness. Eleanor, sensing his internal struggle, spoke gently. "Silas, we need to consider what's best for her. If she is indeed a rare and perhaps even locally unique bird, her survival is important. Once her wing is fully healed, she needs to be able to live as she was meant to." Silas nodded slowly, the logic of her words undeniable. But his heart ached at the prospect of saying goodbye. Then, Eleanor shared another intriguing detail from the old naturalist's journal. He wrote about a specific area of the Broads, a hidden network of waterways and islands known only to a few locals. He believed it was a favored nesting site for the specter of the Broads, a place where they felt safe and undisturbed. A spark of hope flickered within Silas. Perhaps releasing Ariel back into the wild didn't necessarily mean losing her completely. If this hidden sanctuary existed, maybe she would return there, and perhaps, just perhaps, he might catch a glimpse of her again someday. The naturalist's journal also contained a cryptic map, detailing the supposed location of this hidden area. The map was faded and incomplete, but it offered a starting point, a potential destination for Ariel's release. A new plan began to form in Silas' mind. He wouldn't just release Ariel back into the general expanse of the Broads, where she might struggle to find her place. He would take her to this legendary sanctuary, this hidden haven where others of her kind might dwell. It felt like the right thing to do, a way to honor the bond they had formed and give her the best chance at a future in the wild. The air in the Kingfisher's Rest was now filled with a sense of purpose. The mystery of Ariel's origins had deepened, intertwined with local folklore and the secrets of the Broads. The final chapter of their time together was approaching, a journey into the unknown heart of the marsh, guided by a century-old map and the fragile hope of a legendary sanctuary. The whispers in the reeds seemed to be growing louder, carrying with them the promise of discovery and the bittersweet anticipation. The Mariner's Map. The old naturalist's map was a fragile thing, its creases softened with age, its ink faded to a sepia hue. It was drawn on what felt like a piece of treated vellum, rolled and tied with a brittle piece of twine. Eleanor had carefully flattened it, and now it lay spread out on Silas's small kitchen table, illuminated by the soft glow of the oil lamp. He called this area Whispering Willows. Eleanor traced a shaky line with her finger. Apparently, it's a maze of narrow channels, hidden behind a dense screen of reeds and willow trees. He said only those who knew the secret ways could navigate it. Silas leaned closer, his eyes scanning the intricate network of lines and symbols. He recognized some of the landmarks, the crooked bend in the river Thurn, the solitary oak that stood sentinel on a particular bend. But much of it was unfamiliar, a secret world tucked away within the familiar landscape of the Broads. He mentions a sleeping dragon's tooth, a rock formation that marks the entrance, Eleanor continued, pointing to a small, jagged drawing, and a series of marker poles, placed according to the phases of the moon. Silas, who had navigated the Broads for decades, felt a thrill of excitement mixed with a healthy dose of skepticism. He knew these waterways like the back of his hand, or so he thought. The idea of a hidden realm, accessible only through ancient knowledge, was both alluring and slightly unbelievable. Ariel, her wing now strong enough for short flights within the confines of the houseboat, watched their deliberations with her usual intelligent gaze. She seemed particularly interested in the map, tilting her head as if trying to decipher its secrets. The following days were spent preparing for the journey. Silas meticulously cleaned and oiled his punt, ensuring it was ready for the potentially challenging waterways ahead. He gathered supplies, extra fuel for his small stove, dried provisions, warm blankets, and of course, a plentiful supply of fresh fish for Ariel. Eleanor, equally enthusiastic, pored over local archives and spoke to some of the older Broadland residents, discreetly asking about any old tales or unusual heron sightings. She managed to piece together a few more fragments of the Spectre of the Broads legend, tales of a white guardian bird and hidden sanctuaries. As the day of their departure drew near, a sense of quiet anticipation filled the Kingfisher's Rest. Ariel seemed to sense the change in routine, becoming more restless, her gaze often fixed on the open water beyond the houseboat. Silas knew she was yearning for the freedom of the skies. The morning they set off was shrouded in a light mist, reminiscent of the day Silas had found Ariel. It felt like a fitting beginning to their quest. With Ariel perched comfortably in a large wicker basket lined with soft cloths, Silas and Eleanor pulled the punt away from the familiar mooring of the Kingfisher's Rest. The initial part of their journey followed well-known waterways, but as they ventured further, guided by the fragmented clues on the old map, the landscape began to change. The channels narrowed, the reeds grew taller and denser, and the sounds of civilization faded away, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the calls of unseen birds. They found the sleeping dragon's tooth, a peculiar, jagged rock formation jutting out of the water, just as the map had depicted. From there, the way became more challenging. They had to navigate through narrow passages, sometimes barely wider than the punt, pushing aside thick vegetation that threatened to engulf them. Eleanor, with her knowledge of local flora, helped Silas identify subtle markers, an ancient, gnarled willow with a distinctive split in its trunk, a cluster of unusually shaped reeds. The naturalist's map, though old, was proving surprisingly accurate. As they ventured deeper into this hidden network of waterways, a sense of isolation descended. The air grew still and heavy, the only sounds the gentle lapping of water against the hull of the punt and the occasional call of a marsh harrier overhead. It felt like they had entered a secret world, untouched by the modern age. Then, as the afternoon sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, they found it. A narrow opening in a seemingly impenetrable wall of reeds, so well concealed that they would have easily missed it without the map's guidance. Eleanor pointed excitedly. "Look, the whispering willows must be just beyond there." Silas carefully pushed the punt through the narrow opening, and they emerged into a breathtaking sight. A hidden lagoon, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, surrounded by ancient willow trees whose long, weeping branches trailed in the still water. Small, secluded islands dotted the lagoon, covered in lush vegetation. It was a sanctuary of peace and tranquility, a world away from the open Broads. And then they saw them. Several large herons, their plumage a striking white against the green of the landscape, gracefully wading in the shallows or perched majestically on the branches of the willows. They were the specters of the Broads, real and tangible, their presence confirming the truth of the old legends. Ariel stirred in her basket, letting out a soft, excited call, a sound Silas had never heard from her before. It was a call of recognition, of belonging. Silas exchanged a look of wonder with Eleanor. They had found it. The hidden sanctuary. The home of the white herons. Now came the bittersweet moment. The homecoming. The air in the hidden lagoon hummed with a quiet energy. The white herons, initially startled by the arrival of the punt, soon resumed their activities, fishing with elegant precision, their long necks dipping into the still water. Their calls, a series of soft croaks and clicks, echoed across the tranquil space, a language Silas and Eleanor were only just beginning to understand. Ariel, sensing her kin, became increasingly agitated in her basket. She stretched her wings, now fully healed and strong, and let out a series of louder calls, a clear invitation to join her brethren. Silas felt a lump forming in his throat. The moment of farewell was upon them. With slow, deliberate movements, he lifted Ariel from the basket. She stood on the edge of the punt, her white plumage gleaming in the soft light, her dark eyes fixed on the other herons. For a moment, she hesitated, looking back at Silas, a flicker of something akin to recognition in her gaze. Then, with a powerful thrust of her wings, she launched herself into the air. She circled the punt once, a majestic white figure against the backdrop of the green willows, before soaring towards the other herons. They greeted her with soft calls, and one by one, they took to the air, forming a graceful ballet against the twilight sky. Silas watched, his heart swelling with a mixture of joy and sadness. He had saved her, nurtured her, and now he was returning her to her own kind. It was the natural order of things, the right thing to do, yet the silence she left behind on the punt felt profound. Eleanor placed a comforting hand on his arm. "She's home, Silas. Look at them." Together, they watched as Ariel integrated seamlessly with the other white herons. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation. It was as if she had always belonged here, a part of the secret world hidden within the familiar Broads. As darkness began to settle over the lagoon, Silas and Eleanor found a small, sheltered inlet and moored the punt for the night. The sounds of the marsh filled the air. The croaking of frogs, the chirping of insects, and the soft calls of the white herons settling down for the night. They shared a quiet meal, the silence punctuated by the occasional sigh of the wind through the willows. The day's adventure had left them both emotionally and physically drained. "It's extraordinary, Silas," Eleanor said softly, gazing out at the moonlit water. "The legends were true. This place, it's like stepping back in time." Silas nodded, his thoughts still with Ariel. He wondered if she would remember him, the old man who had found her injured and brought her back to health. He hoped she would thrive in this hidden sanctuary, safe and among her own kind. The next morning, as the sun rose, painting the lagoon in hues of pink and gold, they observed the white herons again. Ariel was among them, fishing contentedly, her movements fluid and graceful. She seemed completely at ease, a part of the vibrant ecosystem of the whispering willows. As they prepared to leave, pulling the punt slowly back towards the hidden entrance, Silas noticed something glinting in the shallow water near where Ariel had first taken flight. He reached down and picked it up. It was a single, iridescent white feather, perfectly formed. He tucked it carefully into his pocket, a tangible reminder of their time together. The journey back through the winding waterways felt different. The air seemed lighter, the silence less profound. They had witnessed a secret, a hidden wonder of the Broads, and they carried that knowledge with them. Back at the Kingfisher's Rest, the houseboat felt strangely empty without Ariel's presence. Silas found himself looking at the corner where her basket had been, a sense of quiet melancholy washing over him. Eleanor, sensing his mood, said gently, "It was the right thing, Silas. You gave her a second chance, and you brought her home." Silas knew she was right. But the bond they had formed was real, and the absence of her quiet companionship was keenly felt. Days turned into weeks, and life on the Broads settled back into its familiar rhythm. Silas resumed his boat building and his quiet contemplation of the marsh. But something had changed within him. He had been touched by the magic of the white heron and the mystery of the whispering willows. One misty morning, as Silas sat on his deck, sipping his tea, he saw a flash of white in the distance. A large bird was flying towards the Kingfisher's Rest. His heart quickened. As it drew closer, he recognized the elegant form, the distinctive white plumage. It was Ariel. She circled the houseboat once, letting out a familiar soft call, before landing gracefully on the deck railing, just a few feet away from him. She looked at him with her intelligent eyes, and Silas felt a surge of joy. She remembered him. She stayed for a while, preening her feathers, occasionally looking out at the water. Then, with another soft call, she took to the air again, soaring back towards the hidden sanctuary of the whispering willows. Over the following months, Ariel would occasionally return to visit Silas. Sometimes she would stay for a few hours, other times just a fleeting visit, a white flash against the green landscape. It was as if she was checking in on her old friend, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they shared. Silas understood. She belonged in the wild, with her own kind. But the fact that she chose to return, even for brief visits, filled his solitary life with a quiet joy. The whispers in the reeds now carried a new meaning, a reminder of the extraordinary friendship that had blossomed in the heart of the Norfolk Broads, a testament to the enduring power of connection between man and nature, and the magic that lies hidden in the most whispers of doubt. The occasional visits from Ariel became a cherished part of Silas's life. Each white flash against the green canvas of the Broads was a reminder of their unlikely bond and the secret world of the whispering willows. He started keeping a small journal, documenting each sighting, the weather on that day, and any particular behavior he observed in Ariel. It was his way of holding on to these precious moments. Eleanor continued her research, delving deeper into the folklore surrounding the white herons. She discovered more accounts, scattered through local histories and whispered tales, each adding another layer to the mystery. Some spoke of their almost ethereal presence, others hinted at a connection to the ancient spirits of the marsh. However, not everyone was as captivated by the tale of the white heron sanctuary. A local birdwatcher, a keen but somewhat skeptical man named Arthur Finch, dismissed the legends as fanciful nonsense. He insisted that Ariel was likely just a leucistic gray heron, and the idea of a hidden colony of pure white herons was preposterous. The Broads are well documented, Silas, he argued one day, encountering Silas by the village shop. There's no way a significant population of such distinctive birds could have gone unnoticed for so long. It's just local myth, fueled by a single unusual sighting. Silas, usually a man of quiet diplomacy, felt a flicker of annoyance. He had seen the sanctuary with his own eyes, witnessed the white herons in their secluded haven. He knew what he had seen was real. But Arthur's dismissive tone planted a tiny seed of doubt in his mind. Could it all have been a trick of the light, a misinterpretation of a rare occurrence? He confided his unease to Eleanor during her next visit. Arthur Finch, he thinks it's all just stories. He's a respected birdwatcher. What if he's right? Eleanor listened patiently, then smiled gently. Silas, you saw them. I saw them. The old naturalist documented them a century ago. Local folklore speaks of them. Sometimes, the most extraordinary things remain hidden, protected by the very nature of their secrecy. She showed him more excerpts from the old journal, passages where the naturalist described the deliberate efforts of the local community generations ago to keep the whispering willows a secret, fearing that outside interference could threaten the unique birds. They understood the importance of leaving them undisturbed, Eleanor explained. Perhaps that's why they remained hidden for so long. Despite Eleanor's reassurances, Arthur's skepticism lingered in the back of Silas's mind. He found himself looking at Ariel's visits with a more critical eye, searching for any hint of gray feathers, any characteristic that might align her with a common leucistic heron. But each time she appeared, her plumage remained flawlessly white, her presence an enigma. One day, a more tangible threat emerged. A property developer announced plans to drain a section of the Broads, not far from the area Silas suspected led to the Whispering Willows, to build a new holiday marina. The news sent ripples of concern through the local community, many of whom cherished the natural beauty and delicate ecosystem of the Broads. Silas felt a particular sense of dread. What if this development encroached upon the hidden sanctuary? What if the noise and activity disturbed the fragile peace of the Whispering Willows, threatening Ariel and her kin? He and Eleanor attended a tense public meeting where the developer, a slick and dismissive man named Mr. Harding, outlined his plans. When concerns were raised about the potential impact on wildlife, he waved them away dismissively. "We've conducted environmental surveys," Harding declared with an air of authority. "There are no protected species in the development area. A few common birds, some reeds, nothing of significance." Silas felt a surge of anger. He knew the truth. He knew about the hidden sanctuary, the unique white herons that Mr. Harding's surveys had clearly missed. But revealing the location of the Whispering Willows publicly would risk attracting unwanted attention, potentially endangering the very thing he wanted to protect. He exchanged a worried glance with Eleanor. They were faced with a difficult dilemma. How could they protect the white herons and their sanctuary without revealing its existence and potentially putting it at risk? The whispers in the reeds now seemed to carry a note of urgency, a warning of impending danger to the secret world they had discovered. The fragile trust they had built with nature was now threatened by the relentless shadow of development. The threat of Mr. Harding's marina development hung heavy in the air. Silas found himself constantly scanning the horizon, a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach whenever he saw machinery moving in the distance. Eleanor was equally concerned, spending hours researching environmental law and contacting conservation organizations. Harding's surveys were likely superficial, she explained to Silas one afternoon, her voice grim. "He's probably counting on the fact that no one knows about the white herons. If we could prove their existence in the affected area, it might give us grounds to challenge his plans." This presented a significant challenge. They couldn't simply lead a team of researchers to the Whispering Willows without risking its discovery by those who might exploit it. They needed concrete evidence, something irrefutable, without compromising the sanctuary's secrecy. Silas thought of Ariel's visits. Each time she came, it was a fleeting moment, a whisper of confirmation. He wished he had a photograph, something to show the world the beauty and uniqueness of these birds. But he had always been too caught up in the moment to think of capturing an image. Then, an idea sparked in his mind. The old naturalist's journal. Perhaps it contained more than just descriptions and a map. He and Eleanor carefully reread the brittle pages, searching for any mention of the white heron's habits, their range, or any specific locations they frequented outside the sanctuary. They found a passage describing the herons occasionally foraging in a more accessible area of the Broads, a shallow marshland known as Willow Creek, particularly during periods of high water when their secluded lagoon might flood slightly. Willow Creek was within the general vicinity of Mr. Harding's proposed development. "If we could document them there," Eleanor's voice trailed off, her eyes gleaming with possibility. "It wouldn't reveal the sanctuary itself, but it would prove the presence of a rare and potentially protected species in the area." The plan was risky. Willow Creek was more open, and they would need to be careful not to attract attention. They decided to conduct their observations at dawn, before the usual activity on the Broads began. For several mornings, Silas and Eleanor set out in the pre-dawn mist, their punt gliding silently through the still waters of Willow Creek. They concealed themselves amongst the reeds, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of white. The air was cold and damp, the silence broken only by the calls of distant waterfowl. Doubt began to creep in. Perhaps the naturalist's notes were inaccurate, or perhaps the herons' habits had changed over the past century. Just as their hopes began to wane, Eleanor nudged Silas sharply. "Look," she whispered, pointing towards a distant stretch of water. A lone white figure stood out against the gray of the marsh. It was Ariel, her elegant form unmistakable. She was waiting in the shallows, her long neck poised as she hunted for fish. Silas's heart leaped with joy and relief. Their efforts had not been in vain. They watched her for a long time, taking careful notes of her behavior and the exact location. They dared not get too close, fearing they might scare her away or attract unwanted attention. Over the next few days, they observed Ariel in Willow Creek several more times, occasionally with one or two other white herons. They managed to take a few long-distance photographs with Eleanor's telephoto lens, grainy but undeniably showing the distinctive white plumage. Armed with their observations and the old naturalist's detailed descriptions, Eleanor contacted a renowned ornithologist at a nearby university. Initially skeptical, the professor became intrigued by the evidence Eleanor presented. He agreed to examine their photographs and notes. The waiting was agonizing. Silas felt the weight of responsibility. He had stumbled upon this secret, and now he was caught in a battle to protect it. He found himself looking at the Broads with new eyes, seeing not just a beautiful landscape, but a fragile ecosystem teeming with hidden wonders. Finally, Eleanor received a call from the professor. His voice was filled with excitement. The plumage, the size, the bill and leg color, it's consistent with a distinct, localized population. Possibly a subspecies or a long-established color morph unique to this region. This is significant, Eleanor. Very significant. Armed with this expert opinion, Eleanor presented their findings to the local council, challenging the validity of Mr. Harding's environmental surveys. The evidence of a unique white heron population in the vicinity of the proposed development could potentially halt his plans. The battle was far from over. Mr. Harding was a powerful and determined man. But for the first time, Silas and Eleanor felt a glimmer of hope. The whispers of doubt had been replaced by a stronger voice, the voice of scientific evidence, echoing the ancient secrets of the Broads and the magic of the white herons. The fight to protect the Whispering Willows. The gathering storm. Eleanor's presentation to the local council was met with a mixture of disbelief and cautious interest. Mr. Harding, present at the meeting, scoffed at their findings, dismissing the white herons as mere aberrations, irrelevant to his development plans. A few unusual birds do not constitute a protected species, he declared, his voice booming through the council chambers. My company has followed all due procedures. This is a blatant attempt to obstruct progress. However, the ornithologist's report carried weight. The council agreed to launch a more thorough environmental impact assessment, specifically focusing on the presence of the white herons in the Willow Creek area. This bought Silas and Eleanor some precious time. News of the white herons and the fight to save their habitat spread through the local community and even reached the regional news outlets. Some dismissed it as a quaint local squabble, while others were captivated by the story of the mysterious white birds and the old man who had discovered their secret. Arthur Finch, the skeptical birdwatcher, initially remained unconvinced. But as more people spoke of seeing the white herons in Willow Creek, and as the scientific report gained credibility, a flicker of doubt appeared in his eyes. He even joined Silas and Eleanor on a few early morning vigils, hoping to catch a glimpse of the elusive birds himself. One misty dawn, his patience was rewarded. A magnificent white heron, unmistakably Ariel, landed gracefully in the shallows of Willow Creek, just a short distance from where they were concealed. Arthur watched in stunned silence, his skepticism melting away as he observed the bird's elegant movements and striking plumage. Good heavens, he murmured, his voice filled with awe, they are real. Arthur became an unexpected ally, using his extensive knowledge of local bird life to further document the white heron's presence in the area. His confirmation added significant weight to their campaign. Meanwhile, Mr. Harding intensified his efforts, putting pressure on the local council and even hinting at legal action if his development plans were delayed. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense, the future of the Whispering Willows and its inhabitants hanging in the balance. Ariel continued her occasional visits to Silas's houseboat, seemingly oblivious to the turmoil her existence had stirred. Her presence was a source of comfort and a reminder of what they were fighting to protect. One evening, as a storm gathered over the Broads, casting an eerie light across the water, Ariel arrived, seeking shelter on Silas's deck. The wind howled through the reeds, and rain lashed down in sheets. Silas sat with her, offering her a piece of fish, a silent communion between man and bird amidst the fury of the elements. As the storm raged outside, Eleanor arrived, soaked to the bone but with a determined glint in her eyes. "Silas, I've found something. Old maps of the Broads, predating even the naturalists' time. They show this entire area, including Willow Creek and what appears to be the Whispering Willows, as a designated common land, with specific protections for its unique flora and fauna." This was a crucial discovery. If they could prove that the land had historical protections, it would significantly bolster their case against Mr. Harding's development. The final council meeting was scheduled for the following week. The atmosphere in the community was electric, with many residents rallying in support of protecting the white herons and the natural heritage of the Broads. Mr. Harding arrived at the meeting with a team of lawyers, confident that his financial power and carefully worded arguments would prevail. But Silas and Eleanor were armed with more than just scientific evidence and local support. They had the weight of history on their side. Eleanor presented the old maps, their faded lines and archaic script speaking of a time when the importance of these wetlands was recognized and protected. The council members, many of whom had deep roots in the Broads, were visibly moved by this historical evidence. The debate was long and impassioned. Mr. Harding argued that times had changed, that progress demanded development. But the community, galvanized by the story of the white herons and the dedication of Silas and Eleanor, spoke eloquently about the need to preserve their natural heritage for future generations. In the end, the council voted against Mr. Harding's development plans, citing both the ecological significance of the white heron population and the historical protections afforded to the land. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Outside, the storm had passed, and a fragile ray of sunshine broke through the clouds. As Silas walked back to his houseboat, he saw a flash of white against the green. Ariel was soaring overhead, her silhouette a symbol of hope and resilience. The whispers in the reeds seemed to carry a triumphant note, a celebration of a victory for nature and the enduring power of an unlikely friendship. The shadow of development had been lifted, for now, but Silas knew their vigilance would need to continue, for the secrets of the Broads were precious and needed. Echoes of the future. The victory against Mr. Harding was a significant one, a testament to the power of community and the compelling magic of the white herons. The Whispering Willows remained undisturbed, its secret still safe within the heart of the Norfolk Broads. Life on the Kingfisher's Rest settled back into a peaceful rhythm, punctuated by Ariel's continued visits. Silas cherished these moments, each white flash a reminder of the extraordinary journey they had shared. He continued to document her appearances in his journal, noting the changing seasons and the subtle shifts in her behavior. Eleanor remained a close friend, often visiting Silas to share updates on the local wildlife and the ongoing efforts to protect the Broads. The discovery of the white heron population had sparked a renewed interest in conservation within the community, and several new initiatives were launched to safeguard the delicate ecosystem. Arthur Finch, now a staunch advocate for the white herons, became a regular visitor as well. He and Silas, once an unlikely pair, now shared a common bond, their conversations filled with observations of bird life and the subtle wonders of the marsh. One spring morning, as the Broads awoke in a symphony of birdsong, Ariel arrived at the houseboat with a new companion. Another white heron, slightly smaller and with a more hesitant demeanor, perched beside her on the railing. Silas watched, his heart filled with a quiet joy. It seemed the sanctuary was thriving, its unique population growing. Over the following months, Silas observed Ariel and her companion visiting more frequently, sometimes even bringing fledglings, their downy white plumage a testament to the sanctuary's continued success. The whispers in the reeds now carried the sounds of new life, a promise of the future. The story of the white herons became a local legend, a symbol of the hidden beauty and resilience of nature. Children were told tales of the specters of the Broads, guardians of the marsh, their white wings carrying the secrets of the waterways. Silas, now an elder statesman of the Broads, often shared his story with visitors, his voice filled with a quiet wonder. He spoke not just of the rescue and the sanctuary, but of the profound connection he had forged with a wild creature, a connection that had ultimately led to the protection of a unique and precious part of their natural heritage. Years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the ebb and flow of life on the Broads. Silas grew older, his movements slower, but his connection to the marsh remained as strong as ever. Ariel continued her visits, though less frequently now, a familiar white silhouette against the horizon. One crisp autumn evening, as the mist rolled in across the water, Silas sat on his deck, his journal open on his lap. He felt a sense of peace, a deep contentment with the life he had lived in harmony with the Broads. He saw a white shape emerge from the mist, larger than usual. As it drew closer, he recognized not just Ariel, but several other white herons, circling the Kingfisher's Rest in a silent ballet. It felt like a farewell, a final acknowledgement of their enduring bond. The next morning, Silas was found peacefully asleep in his chair, his journal resting on his chest, a single white feather tucked between its pages. He had become a part of the Broads, his story woven into the fabric of the marsh, just like the legend of the white herons. The Kingfisher's Rest remained moored in its secluded backwater, a silent testament to the extraordinary friendship that had blossomed there. And the white herons continued to grace the skies of the Norfolk Broads. Their ethereal presence a constant reminder of the hidden wonders that lie waiting to be discovered and the importance of protecting the delicate balance of the natural world for generations to come. Their story echoed through the reeds, a whisper of hope and a testament to the enduring power. A legacy of white wings. The news of Silas's passing spread quietly through the Broadland community, a gentle ripple of sadness across the familiar waterways. He was remembered fondly. The solitary boat builder with a deep connection to the marsh, the unlikely guardian of the white herons. Eleanor and Arthur, along with other local conservationists, ensured that Silas's legacy lived on. The area around the Whispering Willows was officially designated a protected nature reserve, named in his honor, the Blackwood Fen Sanctuary. Stricter regulations were put in place to prevent any future development from threatening this unique habitat. The white herons continued to thrive in their secluded haven. Their numbers, though still small, remained stable, a testament to the sanctuary's protection and the delicate balance of their ecosystem. Sightings of the specters of the Broads became more frequent, no longer just whispers of folklore but tangible encounters that filled locals and visitors alike with a sense of wonder. Eleanor dedicated much of her time to studying the white herons, carefully documenting their behavior, their breeding patterns, and their genetic makeup. Her research confirmed the ornithologist's earlier findings. They were indeed a unique, localized population, a precious thread in the rich tapestry of the Broads' biodiversity. Arthur Finch became a passionate advocate for responsible birdwatching, educating visitors on the importance of observing wildlife from a distance and respecting their natural habitats. He often shared Silas's story, emphasizing the profound connection that could exist between humans and the natural world when approached with patience and respect. The Blackwood Fen Sanctuary became a beacon for conservation, attracting researchers and nature enthusiasts from across the UK and beyond. It served as a reminder that even in a seemingly familiar landscape, extraordinary secrets could still be found, and that the efforts of one dedicated individual could make a profound difference. And what of Ariel? While Silas was no longer there to witness her visits, the white heron continued to be sighted in the vicinity of the Kingfisher's Rest, often seen soaring above the now protected fen. Locals believed she was a guardian spirit, a living embodiment of the bond between Silas and the wild heart of the Broads. The Kingfisher's Rest was preserved as a small visitor center, a place where people could learn about Silas's story, The Legend of the White Herons, and the Importance of Wetland Conservation. Silas's journal was put on display, its pages filled with his careful observations and heartfelt reflections. The tale of the white herons of the Norfolk Broads, once a whispered legend, became a celebrated story of conservation success, a reminder that even the most elusive creatures deserve our protection. It highlighted the vital role of local knowledge, scientific research, and community action in safeguarding our natural heritage. If you have been captivated by the story of Silas and the white herons, and if you believe in the importance of protecting our planet's incredible biodiversity, please consider taking action. Learn more about wetland conservation efforts in your area. Organizations like the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, RSPB, in the UK and various wildlife federations in the USA work tirelessly to protect these vital habitats. Support conservation organizations through donations or volunteering your time. Every contribution, no matter how small, can make a difference. Spread the word. Share this story with your friends and family to raise awareness about the importance of protecting unique and vulnerable species. Engage with nature responsibly. When visiting natural areas, observe wildlife from a distance, avoid disturbing their habitats, and leave no trace of your presence. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of the incredible connections between humans and nature, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your support helps us share these important stories and inspire a greater appreciation for the natural world around us. Thank you for joining us on this journey to the misty waterways of the Norfolk Broads and the secret world of the white herons. The whispers in the reeds continue, carrying the echoes of a remarkable friendship and a